This is Alamo Anthem, where we, the overtaxed, remember our liberty. Direct from the forgotten countryside outside of Alamo City, San Antonio. I'm your host, Joe, and we have two lovely co-hosts here with us. Would you introduce yourselves?
I'm Michelle.
And I'm Emily.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe.
By way of introduction, we live in the San Antonio area in Texas. Lately, we've been getting more involved in local politics, looking at our property taxes rise, that sort of thing, and thinking, what can we do about this other than what we're already trying to do? You know, fight at the hearings for our property taxes, going to community meetings or whatever. We thought, well, maybe we should start a podcast and talk about these things, talk about local issues and just whatever else interests us.
That's right. And I think that a lot of people go to the polls and they're ready to vote, and then they see what they're voting for and they don't know anything about it. And who has time as a working class person to look up all of the news articles about everything that's on the ballots? So Joe, Emily, and I thought it would be a good idea to start this podcast to inform local citizens of what their government is doing. We're all busy, and it would be really nice to have somebody who has gone to school board meetings, who goes to city council meetings, and kind of has an idea of what's going on a little bit. On today's show, Joe, we're going to talk about a couple things. This format will pretty much go like this. We will talk about some local issues, such as the local tax battle that we fight on the county level. We will also be discussing some state level things, such as the constitutional amendments that are going to be on the November ballot. We also will be talking about the issue of migration that's happening in Eagle Pass. It's overwhelming the system. It actually caused the city of Eagle Pass to go to have a state of emergency declared by their mayor and Governor Abbott. And then we're going to finish up with some local fun stuff. I like to get on the Nextdoor app, or as Joe likes to call it, the
Nick's Dog app.
So true. I assure you that we will not be discussing lost dogs on this, okay? So that's my promise to you today. So
Well, what about chickens or cows?
I'd be more interested in that.
As would I.
no more dogs. I mean, not that we're anti-dog.
A little anti-dog.
Does it bark?
Then you're anti-dog. You're a hater, Emily.
Do you know what I am? I'm anti people who leave their dogs home all day and the dogs bark all day while their owners are gone. That's what I'm anti.
You've had experience with this.
All day, every day?
How? Can you hear them inside or just outside?
Both.
Both.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you know what I'm an anti-dog of? People who let their dogs wander. Yesterday, I was walking in Divine, and a husky and a dachshund surround me as I'm walking to the golf course. And
You're being hunted.
I was being hunted. And then there was a third one coming up. And
They're like raptors.
I'm a dog person. You guys know this. I have 2 Pyrenees here at home. I love dogs. But honestly, it's unpredictable. You don't know what these dogs are going to do. So I went in the bathroom, in the golf course bathroom, and waited. I'm like, maybe they'll go away. Sat there for a minute. And then I came out. They were still there. Scared me. Oh, we're moving on from the dog issue.
No, I'm telling Emily to get closer to our mic. I'd love to hear more about that. Yeah, Pyrenees, they're great. Okay,
we're
so
even
what's
talking about Pyrenees, Joe. That's how much you don't care about dogs. You don't even want to hear.
You mentioned what you had. And you had 2 Pyrenees at home, and I said they're great.
A husky and a dachshund. But anyway, go on.
No, you're the one with the agenda.
Okay, so the first one.
Doing.
Yep, the first one we're going to talk about is about the Hondo News, the headline that was in the Hondo News. Emily's got it right there. Go ahead, Emily.
It says, repairs all over city moving forward. Street work begins this week south of 24th Street.
So why in the world is this controversial, Emily? How could you? It's
what's wrong with getting the roads repaired? Everyone wants nice roads, right?
It's like hating dogs.
So, if you've ever driven through the streets of Texas, you might have encountered a pothole here and there. And, nobody likes that. We all want it smooth. And they're smoothing it out. They're finally doing it after all this time. And so I think we all appreciate that. I do find it a little bit suspicious that they're doing it right before the election and after an entire, up to this point, calendar year of people going in and protesting their property taxes. What do you guys think about that?
Well, we were talking about this earlier, and I can't help. This is just like such a perfect example, like the classic thing. If you talk to anybody in the world about, reducing the size of government, or, maybe we should abolish the government in this area, or this, if we say taxation is theft, I mean, so just so you all know, we're pretty right-leaning, libertarian-leaning on this show. To reveal our biases.
Full disclosure of our bias.
Liberty-minded is, I think, the way that...
Liberty-minded, yeah. And so a common, thread in that is that we feel like we're being robbed when we get taxed a lot of the times. And so then the first thing anybody ever says all the time is, what about the roads, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's just, I think... I'm with you. I don't know that this is much of a coincidence. It's the thing that everybody sees the most, everybody experiences on a day-to-day basis, and it's the thing that everybody knows is provided by the government. And so it's like, oh, they are doing their job. It's hard to not think that that's really what's going on with the timing, at least.
I also just want to add, my beef with this is that we don't have a really clear, trustworthy, the information isn't clear and trustworthy as to how much goes in and how much goes out. Like, I don't know what really is going on with their budget. And it is my understanding that constitutionally that information is supposed to be clear. So I think that when forced to, for example, there's a firm in the United States called Open the Books, and they go around and they try to make sure that on every level of government, federal, state, and local, that every body of government does show, right, what it is, like how much
transparency.
Yeah, they're trying to force transparency, which constitutionally they're supposed to do that anyway, but they don't necessarily. And so you can go, they actually have an app and a website, it's openthebooks.com. You can go and look in whatever county you live in, and you can try and see, like, how much do all of these school district employees make, for example, or any employee in your city or county. So I don't know, and I don't know if anybody who, besides probably a handful of people in the local government or state government, depending on what roads we're talking about, knows how much it's costing, even though they put some information, in these articles. Like, did they find the cheapest, best, way to do it? I don't know, because it's not their own checkbook. And I don't know how much they have. Like, how much are they actually gathering? All this information should be clear, but it doesn't seem clear to me. Right. So it seems to me, even if they do at some point do a good job of smoothing the roads over and, maintaining them, it is not obvious and clear that they are being efficient and that they're not way overtaxing for that purpose.
Especially when you read articles like this one, which it's from the same newspaper, Anvil Herald, right? Is that Hondo? This is from Hondo Herald. Hondo Anvil. What the heck is Anvil? I don't know. Herald.
Ding,
the
ding,
thing that falls on cartoon characters.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with blacksmithing. It's just like Wile E. Coyote getting hit.
Green light given to supplement salaries of employees in several county offices. Okay, this came out recently. Medina County Commissioners voted 4-0 to supplement salaries for employees in the Medina County auditors, treasurers, and tax offices using tax increment reinvestment zone and public improvement district fees.
Okay, so say what that actually means.
You translate it for us?
Well, it sounds to me like they're saying they're using part of the money from taxes to supplement the salaries of the auditor and treasury tax offices, right? But they already are getting tax money, so I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, my understanding of this was that they had money left over, whatever that means.
Surplus.
And then
after the budget?
Yeah, a surplus after the budget.
After the budget. and then they were taking what was left over and decided to just give themselves raises until the money ran out. Am I wrong?
Then that's what it sounds like to me.
Should I read further?
And it's especially galling that it's the people that's handling the money.
That's
and
the
like
thing.
Taking it, you know.
How about we give ourselves a raise? We deserve it. We've worked hard this summer. We had to endure many hours of
We've
protesting
had so much money to
angry
count.
citizens. Can't imagine why they're so angry.
You wouldn't believe the amount of money we had to count this year.
So I don't know who this is. Medina County Auditor Eduardo Lopez noted, quote, "We did reach out to determine whether we can use some of the fees these offices receive from PID and TIRZ to supplement some of the employees' salaries in these offices. The answer was yes." Okay. I don't know what PID stands for. Do you guys know?
No.
Oh, wait. Well, we know that the TIRZ stands for Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone. That's TIRZ, but I don't know what PID stands for.
So, I mean, are you going to come out against people treating themselves? I mean...
Treat yourself.
Treat yourself.
Remember that
right?
on our Parks and Rec?
Yeah.
They're people too.
Treat yourself. It'd be nice to treat myself. I'm just happy we can pay our mortgage. With the increase of the taxes, don't have much to treat myself with.
Yeah, you know, and like I get it that there are some times where they miscalculate and then they need to figure out what they should do with the money. One thing, this is kind of a tangent, but if anybody's been following Vivek Ramaswamy, who's one of the people running for the presidential nomination for the Republican Party. And one of the things that he points out, and this is in the federal budget, obviously, is that the language changed at one point with budgetary considerations from being that Congress may spend, X amount of money to Congress shall spend X amount of money. And so this is like an accounting, like a thing that they did to make it so if there is budget left over, it's not like they could be like, well, take it or leave it. We could leave it there for next year, whatever. It's kind of written as part of the law implicitly because a budget, it's passed by Congress saying that you must spend it. And so even if you reach all of your obligations for that budget, well, you still need to spend it. And I've heard this my whole life, talking to people that work in school districts and whatnot. And it's like, well, we had this money left over, and if we don't spend it, then our budget goes down next year. And that's why you get all like this crazy, wild spending.
Can we do a full disclosure here?
Absolutely.
So people know where we are. Because I don't want ever to get people to find out about our families and go, those big hypocrites. Both Joe and my husband work for the federal government. Can we say you're a little bit less working for the federal government than Jay because you work for a contracting company, which gets their money from the federal.
To clarify, it's a company with government contracts.
That's right.
So I don't want to. I'm not a contractor, like a freelancer, like working through some random.
You work for a company.
I work for a company, and that company has government defense contracts.
Yes, and then my husband works directly. He's prior military, and he now works still with the Air Force. But I do want to say a couple things about the system, because it's, especially with the education system and our property taxes, when it comes to this stuff, I feel like we've done this to ourselves as citizens. We've created a system by allowing government I don't know why or how. It seems like with the education system, in the name of convenience, in the name of, I don't know, well, we want to educate our children, and we think that's the best way. But we have handed over so much control and power to this educational system that has become a monster that we cannot scale back. It's just too difficult. Because what's happened is it started small. I mean, I'm always a big picture person, so I'm always looking at like, okay, how did this even start? Where did we come from? We used to have the, Little House of Prairie, I imagine, in the 19th century, the little red schoolhouse with the one teacher that the local neighborhood or citizens paid for together. They put their money together and paid this teacher and built this schoolhouse, and that educated the children in that area. Now we've grown into this monstrosity of a public school system that we cannot scale back. And so I look back at the 20th century and I see that parents have pretty much just given that away to the educational system. in the name of, well, first, somewhere to send their kids while they go to school, kind of a daycare type system.
While they go to work.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Work.
Yep.
And then, and also, full disclosure, my mother's a school teacher. But we had this discussion the other day, how ironic it was that my mom, she was divorced. She had she didn't have much of a choice because her degree was in education. And so that was the only job she could get, or at least didn't want to be in squalor. So she became a school teacher. And anyway, she schooled everybody else's kids. And then our grades were suffering. This is not a dog on my mom. My mom was fantastic. It's just to show how we have the school system has become somewhat of a daycare center. And there's no need for it to be as long as it is. Like, the school days don't need... I just talked to someone the other day. Who was it? That just moved here from Arizona, I think. Or Utah. I can't remember. And she was shocked at how long the school days are here. Her kids have to get up at 6:30. They have to be at school by 7:30. And they're there till almost 4 o'clock. That is a long school day for a kid. Why?
Right.
It's not necessary.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about that is just the other day I was listening to Chris Christie.
Yeah.
Well, he was the governor of New Jersey?
Yeah.
A while
He
ago?
was also a presidential candidate at one time.
He is right now.
Oh, he's running again.
He's running again. This is the first... I've heard his name over and over again, but I had never read anything that he had written or listened to him or anything until this one podcast I was listening to. It was Jordan Peterson's podcast. And he was being asked questions like, how would you fix the school system and stuff like that. And one of the things that he said as a Republican candidate is that if he were president, then he would have the federal government take the lead in school choice. So I think he knew that's one thing that everybody wants. He was saying that. But then he also said he would make the school days longer and add weekends. And I thought, does he have any idea who he's talking to? Like, does he know who his audience is? Because it's obvious that it's so long and so hard on the kids already. There's so little family time. I mean, how many families is it the situation where their kids they go to school, or they get dropped off somewhere first?
Oh yeah,
they go to school.
They have the what do you call that? Before school care and after school care.
Right. Yeah, and then they go, and then they go home, they eat, and they go to bed, and they start over.
That's right. Yep.
In the interest of full disclosure, we all homeschool our kids.
Yep.
Emily and I are married, and so we homeschool our kid.
Kids.
Kids?
I know what
did I say kids?
You said kid.
Just the...
It's that they all look the same. Yeah.
Anyway, and Michelle also homeschools.
Her kid. I can say that. Kid.
Maybe I was already moved on to your
Michelle
kid.
has one left.
One
I
left.
have three,
the
but
other
I
ones
have one
are...
left. Yep.
All of us also have had had our kids in the public school system as well.
And we all grew up in going to public school.
Yes.
Or government school. I mentioned this just because, several years ago we started kind of looking into homeschooling. And one of the things that really kind of called to me was what someone wrote about how when you send your kids to school, you are giving away your kids' best hours when they're, well fed and well rested, whatever. And then they get home and it's like they've endured, sometimes like mental, social trauma. They're tired, they've been sitting around for a long time. And then you got to go home and it's like a mad rush to get all the night stuff done. They're at the end of the rope. And that one thing that this family found is that it's like we get to see them like during the whole day. And especially, when they're like bright and ready to go. And, I read someone's Facebook post the other day saying, something like, our kids are at school 8 hours a day. Please don't send them home with 2 hours of homework. You've had them for 8 hours. You can get this done. Like, this is the only family time we have. And I just thought, how sad that is, because it's true.
Can you imagine real quick if you had to, after an 8-hour shift at work, come home and do more work?
Yeah.
That's what we expect our kids to do.
Right.
I'm always just blown away at that. I'd give me a break.
I always also feel like I can't believe how long this has gone on without like major blowback or resistance, but where all of these parents, and there are so many of them, so many of us who've had this experience where you think, you know what, I'm going to do the right thing. And I'm going to take my kid out of school today and we're going to go have some family time. We're going to go to the beach.
How dare you.
We're going to just do something together, to strengthen our family. and they get these dirty, we all have had them,
Oh,
these
yes.
dirty letters, in the mail from the school district threatening you because it's a criminal offense, right?
Yeah,
like
it's a
you can-
criminal offense. It's
I mean-
supposed to be compulsory. Your kids, it's a compulsory.
compulsory,
It is
yeah.
a
And
compulsory
then
education
also
system.
leading up to elections and stuff like that, seeing how much this message, it goes on the message boards, over highways. It's like on TV shows and radios and commercials and magazines that come in the mail, I'm sure through teachers unions and like everywhere you look, about how attendance matters and how your kid's not going to be able to get a job when they get out of high school if you do this. You can't be taking these days off because obviously if you're doing this, you don't care about their education and they're just not going to have the certification that they need. Or they'll tell you how many hours, for example, I have seen this. I'm not even making this part up.
Unlike the rest of what you've said.
Where they'll tell you how many hours of math they will not have done if you pull them out 2 days. I can't remember if it's a month or a year, but in either case, to me, that seems negligible. It doesn't matter. And how by the time they graduate, they will have missed like so much, like 6 weeks of math or something like that. And we're thinking, they have got to be joking. The implication in that message is that every moment is hard, like, learning.
Right.
That they're doing there, and none of it is just like all the passing time.
Oh, please.
All of the
time
waiting,
wasting. Yeah, the waiting for the next thing.
or just even on tablets and stuff like that. There's a lot
their
of that.
phones.
And
Yeah.
let's say that, like, let's say they have, an hour and a half or an hour of math a day or whatever. Like, how much of it is, like, explaining something that has already been explained? And so, like, half the class, they either get it or they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And then how much of it is correcting your work, passing papers around? I don't know how they do it these days, but yeah.
Back to my original point with this. We created this monster because we pretty much have given our rights away to the schools. Emily just made the point. They made it compulsory. Our kids have to be there unless you pull your kids out. And
what is, sorry, just really quick, what does that mean? I mean, I want to make sure people walk through the logic of that. If they say it's illegal for you to not have them go to school, what's the next step? Let's say you just say, no, I'm just not going to make them today. They're having a hard day.
You will
then what?
get... If it's bad enough, I know they give you a few chances, right?
Okay, so then what happens? After
they
you
send you a
blow
letter,
your chances, then
then
what?
you have to go to court.
Okay, so let's say you go to court and you're found guilty of not sending them to school when they think you should have. Then what?
Fine.
Okay, so
I
now
think-
let's say you don't pay the fine.
Well, I think it's like one of those things where if you keep doing it, CPS might be involved. But I'm not 100% sure. So this is just me guessing. Also my experience with, some of my work.
So then ultimately the separation of a family.
Right.
Or
Possibly,
you
yeah.
maybe going to jail.
It depends on the state, too.
Yeah,
it really depends on the
probably
state.
depends on the state, the locality, or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure they know that it's terrible PR if they actually follow through
right.
with it.
This whole idea of, whether you get, like, CPS involved. Because I think that people in the community might quickly get on board with this idea that you're being negligent if you are not, educating, you're not sending them to school, you're not cooperating with the school board or whatever. I mean, I would think that realistically, with people that don't want a lot of bad press, they would probably just say, well, here's the process for homeschooling them. You just need to affirm these 7 things that you're going to teach them. Just sign this paper and then you can have them out of the school or whatever. You know what I mean? I would think that they would kind of push that process along. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hear about it every once in a while. You'll read about a case of somebody being brought to court or having their kids taken away or whatever. It just seems like one of those leverage things where as much as they want to do it to you, they could,
It's just kind of funny if you stop and look at it, because at the beginning we were like, here's our kids. And then now it's like, can we have our kids for a minute? And they're like, oh, no.
Can we go see them in their class? No, you can't.
Okay,
go
but
in.
I don't want people to think that I'm so anti-public school. I am not naive enough to think that everyone can be homeschooled. There are some people, single moms, that could not. They would need the help of the community because they have to be able to provide for their families, and that my mom was one of them. But it's just ironic because how the job she chose was a school teacher. It's just funny to me. But
can I clarify one other thing?
Right.
I think the problems that we have are majorly with the system.
Yes.
We all know a lot of, like, teachers, like your mother included,
Yeah,
right? Where
right.
it's like
Great people.
they want nothing more than to uplift children every day.
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
like and I think that a lot of people recognize that these children are in bad situations, and they're like, this is the one time during the day when they'll have somebody who loves them or whatever, depending on the teacher.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think there are a lot of teachers like that. Kind of once you're in that system, it becomes very frustrating. And one of the things is that schools are contingent, like the money that they get is contingent on them teaching certain stuff. And so like, oh, well, if you teach this curriculum, then you'll get this amount of state funding. Oh, if you include this, then you get some federal funding. Or our
That's
district
right.
has to
And so
affirm
it's
that...
becoming bigger
and so-
because now we've got more money involved, which it
and
gets
so
more employees
The
involved.
day gets longer and longer.
Yep.
Recesses get shorter and shorter. And it's all this, well, we don't want to leave this money on the table, you know, whatever. So
I
it
would
kind of
also
becomes a
point out
self-licking
that
ice
in-
cream cone.
Say that again, Joe. Sorry.
It becomes a self-licking ice cream cone.
I just really like that,
Yeah.
that saying. Sorry.
Oh.
The self-licking ice cream cone
Really
just
got
stole
you.
my thoughts away.
Well, so what I was going to
Oh,
say...
wait, no, I got it.
Okay,
Sorry,
got
Michelle.
it. Go ahead.
Just that one of the things that school districts do for funding is they give kids all these different levels of disability status that benefit the school. So the more types of disabilities that they can label your kid with, the more money your kid is worth to that school from the state.
Right.
So I just want to point that out. And if you look around and you think, you know, I remember when I was a kid, it didn't seem like there's so many kids who were disabled or called disabled.
Or pathologized, right? There's
Right.
a pathology
Right,
for
right,
every
that's what I
little
mean.
thing, you know?
Right. I'm not saying they're actually disabled, but they're labeled disabled.
I'm disabled. IT crowd.
Yeah.
No, what I was going to say is...
I mean, if you're leg disabled, that makes sense. But just if you're having trouble sitting in your chair for 8 hours straight, then...
maybe they need to let you outside for a bit.
Maybe you're a child.
Maybe you're a child. Imagine that. So what I was going to say about that, here in Texas, if you're listening from out of state, it's been in the news. The property taxes have grown exponentially. They're unsustainable, almost. We're at the brink of unsustainability.
I'm
with our
sure that
property
for
taxes.
some people it is unsustainable.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that we know several people who have been right on the edge of selling their houses and leaving.
Right.
That's right.
Because they cannot afford their mortgages anymore with the escrow because of the taxes. That's the thing that this is this wild card that keeps changing. Which I want to say one other thing earlier when we were talking about the extra money that the county had that they were allowed to just give to themselves as bonuses. Is this, I mean, I don't know if this is just a crazy idea, but is there some reason they can't just give it back to the people that they took it from?
Well, that's like Governor Abbott. That's what he wanted to do with the property tax.
And I think that that's one of these propositions.
Yeah.
Is to temporarily increase the homestead exemption for property taxes from $40,000 to $100,000.
Yes.
Using this extra surplus money in the state budget, so it would be a temporary thing. So that
it is a temporary thing.
I
We're
believe
voting
so.
isn't it a constitutional amendment? I don't think it's temporary.
It says temporary in it.
Yeah.
In the constitutional amendment? Well, before you start going into that, let me finish my thought here. So here in Texas, like I said, we are going through this property tax problem, and what's happening?
Crisis. Keep going.
It is a crisis, but on top of that, we have other things going on in our country that's affecting us in Texas as well as it's affecting everyone else in the country, which is inflation and the increase of interest rates and just the economy in general is starting to hurt Texans. And so what my point was in telling you about the system, this education system that we've created, after disclosing that we are part of a system, right? Joe, you're part of a system. Jay's part of a system. We've got to think outside the box to make some drastic changes, which is why I brought this up about the school system and why I brought up homeschooling. Because everyone thinks that you think we're going to keep going on status quo, and status quo is bankrupting us, is what I'm trying to say. We went to the school board meeting last year when it was just starting in 2022 at Medina Valley High School, and I remember addressing them and just saying, like, there's good people in this community who've worked as teachers, ironically, and are retired, and now they're getting hit not just teachers, but I'm just saying, I gave them an example of teachers that they had a retirement, and now the property tax that are funding the very schools that they taught at and retired from are what is bankrupting them, which is so ironic. So we need to make some serious changes in how we do things so that, we got to fix this system. And that's kind of why I homeschool my daughter. And I'm not saying that everyone should do it, but I am saying it's worth looking at. It's worth looking at other alternatives to what we're doing currently that's bankrupting us. It's like, do we really want to shoot ourselves in the foot, or do we want to try to find a way out of this? So
yeah, that's good.
So looking over that amendment real quick, it seems to me like what the change in the Constitution might be is to allow them to
clarify that Constitution, not U.S. Constitution.
No, yeah,
it's the text. This is what's coming up in the ballot, right, in
Texas,
November?
Yeah. I don't know. I could be wrong about this, but
I can read it here if you want.
I know. I've read
Just the short part.
Go ahead.
It says this is how it will read on the ballot. To increase the amount of the exemption from ad valorem taxation by a school district, which is the lion's share of the property taxes that we pay. Okay, so this goes to the school district. It's at least half. Applicable to residents' homesteads. So right now we're exempt from being taxed on the first $40,000 of value on our homesteads.
Mm-hmm.
This would take it from $40,000 to $100,000, but it does say it's temporary.
Right. If I were to guess, it would be the change to the Constitution would allow them to create temporary exemptions, and then they at the same time they would pass this temporary exemption as a House bill or something like that.
So it's got to be an amendment, so we have to vote on it.
Yeah.
And my guess is every educator in the state is going to be voting against this measure.
Right.
Because it's protecting their salaries, right?
Well, and the way that it's, they're, like I was saying earlier, they're like with the school attendance thing. Same thing with this election that's coming up. I've seen magazines in the mail, I assume from teachers' unions and organizations like that, and in other places, but where the way that it's proposed is, do you want education first or not? Right? So if you want to lower this property tax, if you want to pay less property tax, that means that you do not think that education is the number one important thing. That's the way that they frame it.
And it's unfair to say that, because a lot of the people that are suffering from this are people who are retired. And I'm not talking about the 65-year-old, grandpa who's exempt from this. I'm talking about people in the in-between stage that don't have children at home. They're not benefiting from the school system per se. They are as a community. There's that argument. Like presumably we're all benefiting from a quote-unquote educated citizenry, but you have to define what that means to me, because I don't know. To me, it's just okay. It's just okay education,
Well, none of it would be a whole nother long discussion.
It would
to go into the harms, right? Like some of the harms that are coming to students in these government schools.
So what's an alternative? Why don't we talk a little bit about what we're doing? Just a little bit.
Go for it.
So there's a few of us, and this is what I suggest to our listeners who are considering the same things we've thought about.
Which, can I just say?
Yeah.
Probably, to begin with, most of our listeners will just be people we know.
We love you.
And a lot of them, I'm sure, don't agree with our views on schools and whatever. But
okay, but for those who are listening who've thought about these things and are like, hey, what's the first step? We actually know someone who is our good friend, Jonathan Hodnett, who is starting a school. He doesn't call it a school, he calls it a learning center, which I think is a good name for it. And because it isn't necessarily a school, a traditional school, right?
Well, and there's a technical reason for that too. Like if he were to call it a private school, then the government gets to tell him how to do it, all the hours it needs to be and what he has to teach. And that's exactly what we don't want.
That's right. Mm-hmm. So it's a learning center that a few kids get together every day. Well, 3 days a week. And then they do different projects. They work with animals because they have a small farm there. They work on projects like they just recently built a go-kart, which I thought was really cool. They work on their sports, whatever they're playing. They have practice. Right now it's soccer, I believe. did see him do basketball the other day. A little bit of that,
We're doing
too.
some music, some student-led, peer-led.
Yeah, they're
kinda
starting a
music,
band over there.
stuff,
Yeah. I think it's
actually
great.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And the philosophy behind it is that...
Well, hold on 1 second before you tell that. So that's the first half of the day is when they're doing all the stuff that you just talked about, Michelle. Then they, like super practical skills too. They make lunch.
They make their own lunch.
Right, like they cook.
Yep.
You know, and they eat and clean
All
up.
of this is supervised, by the way. It's not just a bunch of kids randomly cooking and burning down stuff.
But
there's
they
a
do
teacher
get to
there.
do a lot themselves at
They
the
do.
same time. So it's not like constantly over their shoulder, but they are gaining, mentorship and help and everything and encouragement along the way. And then in the last 3 hours of the day, that's when they do their more traditional academic stuff. So they do an hour of reading, an hour of language arts, and an hour of math. Or if they have other things that they need to work on, like they have lately, they've all needed to write papers for a class that they're doing, then they would work on their essays and yeah. So go ahead.
Well, it's just a beautiful thing. I mean, so they're socializing. So a lot of the things we get from, and by the way, this podcast was not meant to be focused on homeschooling. We just we're talking about
passionate
education,
about it.
and I'm very passionate about it. Being someone who wasn't homeschooled, went through the public system, I just felt like I got a subpar education. I can't complain enough about it. Part of it was my own family issues that were going on. But what's beautiful about this is our kids aren't on screens.
Right.
And they socialize.
And they have, and this is part of the experiment, right? Like
It is
like
kind of an
one
experiment.
of the main goals of this school or learning center is to have a particular culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that all the kids love each other. Like they're good to each other,
Kind.
and they encourage one another, and they play together well, and they help teach each other and stuff like that. There's none of the anxiety and the stress that I see kids having at regular schools.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
So, what is it? VFD Learning Center? Is that what it is? And so, as far as I understand right now, they're still kind of building out the business, and we have our kids there, but they will. It is a business, and it will. I think they'll be accepting enrollment soon.
Yeah, soon.
For new students.
We'll be keeping you updated on that.
Yeah.
As that's
speaking of it being a business, that's one other thing I just remembered about it that I really like is that, so Jonathan knows how to start businesses and run businesses. And so that's one of the things for all the students who are interested, that he's letting them go through the steps of turning it into a more official business.
Yeah.
So they know how to start a business. And if they have any business ideas of their own, I mean, I know some of the younger ones, they want to sell chicken stuff, chicken eggs, chicks. What are they called when they're between chicks and full grown? Whatever those are.
Oh, don't put me on the spot. Jay would know the
And,
answer to that.
laying hens, roosters,
Yeah.
meat, like they want to do this, and he knows how to do it.
Yeah.
And they're helping him with the web application and all that.
Web
So,
development.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
It's so great.
Similarly, like I would think, just anything that they want to do. This is my understanding of it. Maybe you can correct me. Is that part of the idea of the tuition is just if you wanted to start a business where you're like, I want to start selling these things on Etsy. Or it's like, okay, well, what would we need to be able to make those things? Okay, well, let's buy this like leatherworking stuff or whatever it is, right? So that they can do it then at the school. And to kind of continually build out the capabilities of what people are able to do there so they could say, I have this idea, I want to start doing this. And it's like, okay, well, let's figure it out, instead of just being like, well, we don't offer that here.
So great. All right. Well, next we were going to talk about the issue that's going on in Eagle Pass. There was a growing wave of migration. This is from the Wall Street Journal. So it was so bad that Eagle Pass Mayor Rolando Salinas Jr. declared a state of emergency as thousands of migrants are entering daily, quote, overwhelming the resources of the federal border agents and the community's only shelter. So total amount in like a week, guess how many?
100,000.
Not that many.
Okay, 10,000.
10,000 in a week. Okay. I don't know how much it's up to this year, but if it's been 10,000 a week, it must be quite a bit in a year, right? It's getting so
500,000.
bad, in fact, and this is very controversial to some people, but I'm kind of frustrated because Abbott is busing, Governor Abbott's busing some of these people to like New York, which I think is kind of funny, and Chicago. And hey, listen, if you're from New York, I'm sorry. But we've been dealing with this border problem for years. And Texas has been begging for the federal government to do something since Biden has been in office. And he's done zip, nada, nothing.
My understanding is that, because wasn't it right before Abbott got reelected, he was like, we're going to just enforce our own border or something like that, right? But before that, I seem to remember, and maybe you guys can correct me if I'm just imagining this, I thought that Texas all the while was trying to, but that Homeland Security would not allow them to.
Yeah, because in the Constitution, the borders are federal government responsibility. And so, which to me, I'm like, there should be some like amendment there that like comma, unless you're a border state. Because how many of the states in the country are border states? Those are the only
borders that would have anything to do with the federal government.
No. What about the one, like the ocean? They should be able to defend, the federal government can defend those parts. But like the ones that that affect the state, there should be a caveat there, in my opinion. Where the state, well, this, the state should have more power to defend their own border, in my opinion.
The way that the Constitution is written and kind of the way that I think everything is set up is with a certain attitude of conservative, for lack of a better word, leaning, right? So the idea being, if you don't have this branch of government and this branch of government agree on something, nothing happens, right? Like, it's, that is to say that, like, whatever is the status quo, you should kind of, like, assume. And I would say that if you have a country at all, what that means, if you are controlling any border at all, then you're deciding who gets to come in. Who gets to come in, who's a citizen, whatever. And so, between the federal government and a border state, whoever is the most conservative, the most restrictive, should win, right? Like, that basically, like, I agree with you. I think that if you're a border state and there's a certain policy, that you should have veto power over that if it's towards the more conservative direction. We're saying, like, no, we're not going to admit, like, this many people. And when I say that it's more conservative and you might even say more traditional or more status quo, is you look at any other country in the entire world and they have tighter borders than the United States does. And like, if you want to call that xenophobic, then most everybody else in the world is more xenophobic than the United States.
That's true.
Because they say, here's the reasons you can come in, and if we don't approve you, you don't get in. And even if you do get in, you're never a citizen.
I have strong
your whole life, or
I have strong opinions on this because I have a daughter who's an immigrant from Jamaica, a daughter-in-law from Jamaica, and she had to go the long way to get. She's not even a citizen. She's got her permanent residency, which took 2 years to get. And these guys, I think every immigrant that came here legally and went through the proper channels probably feels the same way. It is not fair that these people can just come in and just have all the benefits that they get who had to pay the price, wait in line. And so this to me is not an issue of race or being xenophobic of any sort. To me, this is more of an issue of sovereignty, law and order. If we have a law, then we should keep the law. If there
are no borders, then having a country has no meaning. There is no sovereignty.
That's right. Yeah.
Because of the way that it affects our, if you want to use the buzzword, democracy, right? Even if they don't vote, legally or illegally or whatever, they're still counted as people who live in a certain area, right?
So they have more delegates.
So then that state gets more delegates, and whichever way that state
even if
goes,
they're not citizens, they're still counted?
They're still counted on the census.
So,
yeah.
wow.
So you can just, keep on pumping more and more people into, let's say, California.
So that seems like Abbott should not be giving New York more people.
Yeah, why is he doing
so
that?
It's funny. I think it's to kind of, I think it's a political thing, but just recently I heard on another podcast that in Williamsburg, New York, which is a pretty liberal area, right? So they're like, typically the type of people that'd be like, oh yeah, we believe in open borders and amnesty cities or whatever. They started housing migrants in like one of the school gymnasiums. And it was a gymnasium that had just been built. And so everybody was kind of looking forward to it. And now they can't use it, and nor can they even go out for like recess and stuff in this area because there's all these like men, mostly men, migrant men in this gym that they are able to come and go because they're not in prison
they
there.
would house them with our children.
Exactly, right? So they're trying to keep them separate. So then like what do? Oh, you build a wall. Right?
You've got to be kidding.
I'm
There's a
not-
wall?
I think there's a fence, right? Between this like separate building and the other one.
Those racists.
Right. And then, they're pretty upset. They're like, we never agreed.
So they're not upset about the wall.
No.
They're upset about the
They're
migrants
upset about
that are
the
there.
migrants, yeah.
I know.
And why wouldn't you
grown
be?
men living in their
Proximity,
kids'
close
school,
proximity to the school, yeah.
where the kids are all day without their parents. That's what's bothering you?
Yeah, crazy, right? I mean, it's like, don't you trust the process?
Come on. Trust us. Well, it's a problem here in Texas. It's been a problem for a long time. I live close, not real close to the border, but fairly close to an interstate where they bring people and dump them off. And there's been a few stories of them being dumped. And they use the word dumped. And then they really are. They're like, maybe that's not the right word, but like they let them go right here in this town. And they've ruined like farms. They've like cut open fences. They've broken water lines to get water. I mean, the desperation that they have, of course, they're trying to survive. So they'll do whatever it takes to survive. And so, but in the process, other people are being affected and they're upset about it. And so it's causing a problem. I just read recently about, you talked about New York. Well, there's an article here about Chicago where they're not happy about it.
While you look for that, we have a mutual friend who just has terrible luck with their trucks. So they've had cats more than one time climb into the engine, and then they didn't know it, and they start the car, and then it ruins the engine. And
Ruins
another
the cat.
time,
Something awful.
yeah, it's not great for the cat either. And then another time, they had their truck stolen, and apparently their truck is the most popular truck to be stolen. What was it, an F-150?
Yeah, I think so.
And so oftentimes what'll happen, and I believe it is, these people who, they're in probably a pretty desperate situation.
Yeah, that's right.
So they're good at stealing this particular truck, or maybe this particular truck is good at doing whatever it is they intend to do.
Easy to steal.
Or both.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they do is they steal the truck, and then they know that once they're in pursuit, or being pursued, by the police, that if they just go off the road, and everywhere, if you don't live in Texas, everywhere is fenced because it's private property everywhere. So they just drive through fences, and then they just ride on people's land, because there's a lot of land. And then they'll just go until they get like stuck between two mesquite trees or something. And this happened with these friends of ours' truck. And so it was stolen and gone, and they finally had received a phone call that it had been found, and they're like, well, yeah, you can come on down here, and here's your truck. So they came, and it was just mangled with barbed wire, smashed all over, the paint. Everything was just completely comically totaled. And
yet not comically. Because there's a consequence.
Right.
Who pays the responsibility for that? Who bears it?
Right. Yep.
So, so here in this Chicago article, the headline is, as the number of migrants, and this was the end of August, so this is a little bit old, but as the number of migrants to Chicago tops 13,000, which I'm sure it's more by now, the city struggles to provide housing continues. And we all can relate a little bit to this. But here's what's so interesting. I am absolutely livid, unquote, Doris Lewis yelled at a tense community meeting in Hyde Park Wednesday. Lewis is one of the many Hyde Park residents who spoke out against the idea of approximately 300 migrants set to move into Lakeshore Hotel as early next week. Quote, I don't know where they come from, said Gail Baker, another Hyde Park resident. I don't know what the intentions are. I don't know the time frame. I don't know if this is temporary, if this is long term. So the residents in Chicago are feeling the pain of this because I'm sure crime rate is going up. I'm sure they're having the same issue we're having here in Texas, as somebody has to bear the responsibility of having that many people that are not just people, but people having fled their country who probably have massive need. Not just they're relocating. They're needful people. They're needy people who need help from the community.
Even if we just went on a trip, to Oklahoma with like nothing but like a backpack or something, we'd be pretty desperate by the time we got to Oklahoma.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, it's pretty understandable.
Just like all these arguments come into mind, it's like, well, if they're this needy, if they're this in need, like, isn't it our responsibility as the United States, shining city on a hill, all these things. And I think it's like we need to be real in the sense that you have borders, property lines, gates, fences, doors, locks. You have all of these things for a reason. And it's because you can't have everybody's problem all the time. You have to pick and choose and decide, right? Like there are so many atrocities in the world, right? Every country. I mean, so many countries in the world, they have atrocities. And if we just all of a sudden made all of the problems ours, I mean, we would cease to have a country, right?
And
if we took
can't effectively solve any of them.
Just that it just doesn't come from a lack of. I think it's exactly what you said. It's about law and order, and it's about controlling, you know, the aid that we give. And I mean, my personal opinion on it is that I like immigration. I think it's great, but only if we know exactly who we're getting, if it's all legal. Like I would even be for increasing the legal amount and then closing the border completely.
Right.
Yeah, I mean closing the unsecured border.
Right.
Right.
Well,
100%
also,
close that, and then just maybe even doubling the legal, you know, immigration or whatever, just so people have hope that if they wait a little while and if they go through the system and if they have background checks or whatever, they can do it. And then the people that you really don't want, well, it makes it very difficult for them to come by because they're the only ones trying to get over the border.
It's because Democrats and Republicans use it as a political issue. They both use it to try to get elected, and that's why it'll never get done because they're not serious about it. They're not. They don't care. One thing I want our listeners to know.
Really quick,
go ahead.
I think the biggest thing is to make sure that the incentives are set up correctly, right? So if you are offering free stuff and not allowing them to work, those are bad incentives. Plus, I mean, who are politicians, you know, to like just say, hey, I have funds for you. Well, it's like, well, they're not yours. They're
That's
the
right.
people who've been working, you know, all the time. So, you know, I'm just saying it would just be much better. And it's much better for the recipients of stuff, you know, too, if instead they are allowed to work. People are healthier and happier if they are more independent.
Totally. That's a fact right there. That's true.
That's a fact.
All right. So our last thing we're going to talk about before we end. So I want to pull something from the Nextdoor app, like I promised at the beginning of this episode. Some of these things are funny. They're comical. If you get on here, there's some that are funny. I posted one that was funny. Anyways, not me. I wasn't talking about mine.
We'll just have to take your word for it.
No,
Michelle,
I read one.
Sure,
Sorry. Here's one from. And by the way, if you want to be on our show, you know, put something on Nextdoor app. Put something. Maybe we'll if it's zingy and fun and like, you know.
Yeah.
Clever.
Sufficiently politically incorrect.
Well, maybe we'll talk about it. So today we're going to talk about Janice Torres from Great Oaks, who said, "Let people vent." That was her post. She says, "It's important to let people vent. We need a place to share our complaints and concerns. Venting doesn't solve the problem necessarily, but it helps to blow off steam. If people have no place to vent, they may take actions that are harmful to themselves and others. Stop flagging people's posts. If individuals are upset by certain posts, let them block or mute the person." I thought that was really fun.
Yeah.
I liked what this lady said who commented. Her name is Marlene Estep from Casterville. She said, "I guess this was your vent."
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm not on that app. I mean, I'm not against being on it. I just don't like hearing about dogs. So it's other users that are flagging it, or it's the platform itself that is taking it down?
I think the platform has hosts in every area.
I
So
see.
like there's Hondo Nextdoor app, Casterville Nextdoor app, Divine, and so forth. And I think those hosts take it upon themselves to make it the way that they feel it should be.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's people flag it just like they would on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. But I also, when I tried to post, this is all I said. Okay? I said, "Amen. What's the point of these stupid apps if not the exchange of ideas? There is such a thing as scrolling and ignoring." That was I agree with that. And so when I posted that, the app itself said, "Be kind." Like, you sure you want to say this?
Because you use the word stupid?
Maybe.
I'm sure it is, yeah.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
And then I hit send anyway, you know. But they're like, "You sure you want to say this?" So it's like this weird filter
Yeah.
to like
Algorithm.
double think, make you think
Yeah.
twice before
Yeah.
you post. So that's why I don't know if it's.
Well, what do you think about that? 'Cause, I mean, I think there's
Go ahead.
a good reason. I mean, I can imagine from, like, let's say you own Nextdoor, right? And you're like, well, I don't want it to become an app where people say, oh, that's such a cesspool. You know what I mean? Because that's what they say about Facebook or
Well, they
Twitter.
should say it's a cesspool for dog ads. Lost dog, found dog. Do you want a dog?
Next dog. I mean, obviously it's very useful for the dogs. So I don't want to get too down on that. But I don't know. I think that
I think the dogs love it.
I could see that. I could see a case for that, right? Where you're just like, well, we want to make sure that people when they get on here, they don't feel like a lot of negativity, right? And you don't want to be turning people against their neighbors either. But I agree, like free speech should always win out, and it's like you could ignore people. So
Well,
just don't engage.
my opinion on it is just what I said. If you don't like it, you don't have to react. You can keep scrolling, right?
And that's the thing, is a lot of
It's not like you
apps,
have to talk. It's weird to me that
it rewards engagement, and negative engagement is something that is rewarded with all these apps.
Yeah.
So just don't engage.
it's just funny to me because, like, if you were having a normal situation where someone was like talking to someone else and they were saying stuff you didn't like, you'd probably be like, and then walk away rolling your eyes, right? For some reason, people
Depending
act
on your
like
age.
I think that's what
children.
normal people do.
People
know
act
if we
like
would.
children when they're on social media and do this tattletaling thing. It's weird. Like,
Yeah.
why can't you just walk away like you would if you were in person? Just not look at it and, ignore it. I don't understand.
Here's what I
about
think.
why-
I have this theory that it takes everybody a different amount of time, but like maybe like 2 or 3 years of being on these apps to realize, like, these are people. This isn't just like a computer screen. I think everybody has to like kind of grow up when it comes to that, and maybe
Maybe.
We
just
have to
people
have
haven't
our
been
own
on long
virtual
enough.
upbringing.
Right? Exactly.
We've had our
Oh,
physical
true.
upbringing.
Yeah.
See, I was on Facebook since 2006 when it first popped up. And
Early
it
adopter.
used to be the most... It
So
was
you're
just like...
basically 13 years old now in your virtual life.
Yeah, maybe that's the case.
Pretty good.
No, older than that.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
What year are we in?
2023.
Like
So what am I?
18, 17?
Oh, yeah, I'm an adult
17,
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Almost.
that's right.
Could
Well,
almost
so-
smoke.
Oh, yeah. I'm there. I'm almost there.
Virtually.
But what's interesting to me, because it was like, to me, that was the golden age of the internet. Before, like, from 2000 to about 2006.
You could say the N-word on the internet back then.
You could?
Did
I
you
don't-
Without
try it,
getting
Joe?
flagged?
I think you could say anything without getting flagged.
Back then.
Back then, yeah.
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 Well, why I think it's the golden age is there was none of this big tech power. It was kind of, big tech was on the rise, but they hadn't monopolized yet. And so Facebook was fun because I don't even think Mark Zuckerberg or whoever was on the board back then even thought about having to censor. They were just like, here it is. Here's this fake book or Facebook, whatever it is. And then we all just did what we wanted with it.
Didn't it start out as like you needed a college, like a college
It started
email
like-
address
yeah.
before you, like, in order to
Yeah.
make a thing?
Back in the day, before they had the internet,
Face smash?
they had the Facebook,
Uh-huh.
which was like a yearbook of sorts, but it was like a directory. So it had your picture, kind of a bio, your phone number, and so if you needed to, keep
Yeah.
in touch with a friend or something, you would get your Harvard Facebook. The
It was
Facebook.
never my face.
It was never my face. Like MySpace. Were you on MySpace?
I saw it.
You were on it?
I didn't get on it, but
Yeah.
I was too old.
seen it.
I was too old, but not too old for Facebook. But anyway, and
As
then
we've seen, nobody's too old for Facebook.
Oh, I know. My mother's on there. Love you, Mom. My dad's
Some
on there.
people might be too
Love you,
young
Dad.
for Facebook.
That's true. Yeah, my kids.
What are they on now, primarily then?
TikTok or Instagram?
Oh, yeah, those
You know?
two. Uh-huh.
I think.
That's what I think.
I,
So.
You know
I'm
what'd be
oldie
fun?
foldy. I don't know. My kids tell me that all
What
the
if we
time.
never set our ages and we just had people guess,
Okay.
see how old they think we
I'm
are?
sure that
just
I've
as we
pretty
talk.
much aged
Outed
myself.
yourself?
Yeah,
Yeah.
in this whole thing. So if you have an idea of how old Joe and
on all
Emily
the
are,
clues.
go ahead and post it on Nextdoor. I'm going to take this first video. I'm going to post it on Nextdoor once we get it edited.
Oh,
and
nice.
put it up there.
Yeah.
And then we'll see what happens with it. Hopefully people listen. We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have today, Joe. Emily?